Hello everyone, let me introduce myself. My name is Nurul Aryani. Today, I would like to speak about international law. This is the university project under the guidance of my lecturer, Ms. Rina Sarwa. Firstly, I would like to explain what is the international law. International law is about all regulation concerning between state and nation. International law regulates all activities of the people in different states, but not all human activity can be regulated by using international law. It's because each state has difference in the tradition and culture. International law can only be applied to things that are of a general nature, which were previously agreed by the parties of the state that address to international law. International law must still refer to the rules and that govern the relationship between nation and state community. The goal of international law is to ensure the state and nation will be at peace with each other and to have the international security and welfare and to make sure that every state needs to be treated equally and no discrimination under the international law. They have two meanings of international law: modern approach and traditional approach. Modern approach is the law that regulates the activity of all nations all over the world, and the traditional approach is the conduct relationship of the state. Now I would like to explain about the divisions of international law. There have two divisions of international law. First is the public international law, second is the private international law. Public international law is to deal with issues that affect the general public or state, and then the private international law is to affect the rights and obligations of individuals, families, and small groups, and to assist the citizens in disputes that involve the private matters. There have five sources of international law. First is the international conventions. Second is the international customary law. Third is the general principle of law. Four is the decision of court, and five is the doctrine. Now I would like to give you example the international conventions. What is the international conventions? International conventions is the rules that made by the international community that every state need to obey and need to ratify. For example, the ILO C-189 or the International Labour Organization's Conventions 189 about the migrant domestic workers' rights. Few countries is already ratified these conventions, for example, Philippines. There are some branches of international law. First is the international criminal law. Second is the international humanitarian law. Third is law of the sea. And four is diplomatic of law. Five is consular of law. And still have few many others. Talking about the law of the sea, I still remember that Indonesians ratified the United Nations Convention's Law of the Sea or UNCLOS on 1948. The relationship between international law and national law. They have two types. First is the monism approach. Second is the dualism approach. The monism approach is the international law and national law can use together and automatically can use by the national court is because the international law is part of the national law. How about the dualism approach? The dualism approach is really different. They are more using the national law and they are no power for the international law and cannot be automatically used the national courts. However, the national law only can adopt the international. Subject of international law is about the capability to enter into relationship between the states, and there is always talk about the rights and obligations. There have five of subjects of international law. First is the state, second is the international organizations, Third is the holy thrones of Vaticans. Four is the individual or the people inside the nations. And five is the belligerency. There have two types of recognitions. First is the recognitions of the states, means its permanence. Second is the recognitions of the governments, mean it's not relative permanence, and it will be always can change times to times. And they have four types of recognitions of the states. First is the express recognitions. Second is the implied recognitions. Third is the collective recognitions. And the fourth is the premature recognition. Now I would like to speak about the state responsibility. The law of the state responsibility are the principle governing when and how a state is held responsible for a breach of an international obligation. And there have two types of the state responsibility. First is the intentional and second is the negligence. The intentional is a conduct that we have to decide already from the first beginning, and then the negligence is a conduct that we have no idea from the first beginning and just happen accidentally. The sovereignty of the state is connection with the international system, which every country has their own rules, and so that all the members of the international community need to obey it, and they need to regulate each other for the good system. And there have two types of immunity. First is the absolute immunity, and the second is the restrictive immunity. Now our topic is very interesting. It's about the human rights. Human rights is the rights of the people given by God, and no one has an authority to take someone's rights. Even the state cannot take it, and it is a fundamental. Human rights are standards that allow people to live with dignity, freedom, equality, and peace without a discrimination. I remember when I was in Singapore, I ever do volunteer with one of NGO. They are helping the migrant workers' rights, especially the domestic helper. They have a lot of cases, for example, like illegal deployments, abuse by employer, never get any payment. But of course, it's not only in Singapore. We can see all over the world also have these same cases. So if you see in this kind of cases, where is the human rights? So this is the last video from me, and actually still have a lot more that I need to understand about the international law. But I would like to thank you with my lecturer, Miss Rina Sahrullah, who already teaching me about the subjects of international law. And in the future, I will love to learn more about the international law. Thank you very much.